Okay, so you guys probably saw my last video, which talked about left-handed bowling. And to add on to this video, I kind of wanted to talk about the two-handed side of things, because a lot of people really don't like two-handers. And if you thought the debate about left-handed bowling was heated, or even to the point where I should make a video on it, wait until you hear what people say about two-handed lefty bowlers. Because we're talking about players who combine the most controversial techniques in modern bowling with what a lot of people would consider an unfair advantage, or at least a slight fair advantage. Here's what drives me crazy. Half the people screaming about this don't even understand what two-handed bowling is. It's completely legal. Jason Belmonte didn't cheat his way to over 30 PBA titles, and yes, for consistently being on TV as a lefty, shouldn't be something to look down upon. Technique isn't really something against the rules. It's not about equipment manipulation, it's not about some loophole that needs closing. But today we're going to settle this once and for all. Why two-handers, and more specifically two-handed lefties, have become bowling's most controversial players, and whether this anger is justified, or just traditional bowlers refusing to adapt. I will say, first of all, I am a youth bowler, so this video might be slightly biased in the favor of two-handers, but yeah, okay. Let's get on to the video. But first, I'm gonna have to ask you to subscribe because we're pretty close to 10K and I'm looking forward to hitting that soon. But anyways, let's get on with it. Let me be crystal clear when I say this because the misinformation is ridiculous. Two-handed bowling is 100% legal under USBC rules, and it always has been. The USBC rulebook doesn't really specify that you have to use one hand. It doesn't even specify that you have to use a thumb, which is why players like Tom Doherty throw it the way they do. And another further thing to do with that rulebook is it doesn't mandate you have to bowl traditionally. It doesn't mandate a thumb, it doesn't mandate fingers. All it says is you have to fill every hole in the ball because of weight holes being banned. It also doesn't mandate footwork. You don't have to take a certain amount of steps, and there's no banning with like getting in front of the ball return, something like that. The rules instead focus on equipment specifications, lane conditions, and conduct, not technique. If you were gatekeeping technique, I would say that Jacob Buttriff has a much less textbook form and would be much more subject to hate and criticism than most two-handers. For example, when Jason Belmonte first appeared on the PBA Tour and widely began spreading two-handed bowling, there were some questions about whether his technique, or the subsequent adapters that started using it, if they should be allowed to continue. A lot of tournament officials reviewed the rules, consulted with USBC leadership, and determined that nothing was wrong in the regulations and nothing prohibited two-handed bowling. Ever since then, the technique has been explicitly acknowledged as legal in official communications and rulebooks. The PBA has embraced two-handed players, and the USBC has never attempted to restrict the technique, really. If you wanted to ban two-handers, how would you start? Would you look at it at a purist point of view where you wouldn't want anyone doing two fingers, no thumb? Because that would ban a lot of traditional bowlers too. Would you want to do it to where you can only do it a specific way? You have to make a certain approach, ban bowlers like Buttriff? How would you really establish a ban on two-handed bowling? Because at the end of the day, pretty much every single pro bowler starts with a push away, a two-handed motion. And before we start complaining about two-handed being babyish, think about how bowling originally started. It started with much smaller bowling balls that eventually adapted into the bowling that we have today. Back in the era of candlepin and duckpin, I'm sure it is much more common for people to use one hand. So, subsequently, we got the thumb hole when the balls became bigger. If you had never seen the sport of bowling before, and you had a bowling ball that had two finger holes in front of you, would you throw it two-handed the way that most people would, if you had the time and patience to learn it? Because in all honesty, it doesn't really make sense to be hating on two-handed bowlers, because they just didn't put a thumb in the ball. They're not gatekept by a thumb that's preventing them from going further with their wrist. Two-handed bowling works well because it removes the physical limitations that constrain traditional technique. One-handed bowlers are yet again limited by a thumb. You can only generate so much rev rate and ball speed. It just creates another variable. By taking their thumb out, they can tuck their wrist further, they can get a more consistent swing in a lot of cases, and they can generate more power by being consistently under the ball and not coming down to strength issues. This lets them be able to create rev rates of 550 plus easily, and also maintain ball speeds of 18 to 20 miles an hour fairly easily. Sure, you might be able to get faster with two-handed or one-handed, but does it really matter at the end of the day? But the real advantage isn't just power, it's control and consistency, as I mentioned before. Two-handed bowlers use their entire body as a stabilizing system. They're able to make things a lot more consistent by removing variables. Now take everything that we've talked about so far related to two-handed, and combine it with the advantages of being left-handed. Untouched oil and untapped market. What might be bad for a one-hander with a fairly low rev rate, if you have 300 rev rate, it's going to be pretty hard to get past those maybe up to 30 mils of oil in the lane. If you're increasing the power by going from, let's say, 300 revs to 500 and 18 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour, you're going to get much better pin action regardless of how well you are actually hitting the pocket. As a one-handed lefty, there is no worse situation than a pattern where you can't get the ball to hook whatsoever. But two-handed kind of takes that out of the equation by effectively doubling your rev rate if you're at an amateur level. This is right where the controversy just explodes. Right-handed, one-handed bowlers watch players who they believe have two distinct advantages: the technique that generates pretty good ball reaction, and lane positions that just never break down. And that is extremely good if you are consistent, and if you have the power. Oftentimes, the visual is brutal during tournament play. 15 right-handed players battle through increasingly difficult conditions, in a lot of cases, constantly moving and switching equipment. Meanwhile, the two-handed lefty stands in the exact same spot, throws the same ball, and strikes at rates that seem to mock everyone else's struggle. But let's zoom into why people actually hate this technique. First of all, when Jason Belmonte jumped onto the tour in 2008, he made other techniques look absolutely useless. His career numbers are staggering to this point. Over 30 PBA titles, multiple Player of the Year awards, and scoring averages that consistently exceed what league bowlers can do even on house shots. But what really frustrates us traditional players is that he makes it look so effortless, which some like to refer to as being unathletic. And honestly, this makes sense. For many years now, bowling has had to battle the whole thing of being unathletic. It is an athlete sport at the end of the day. A lot of very famous athletes have bowled and bowled really well. Just look at someone like Mookie Betts, who picked up bowling and bowled really, really well. But the psychological impact is also devastating for one-handed competitors. They're not feeling like they're losing to better players. They feel like they're losing to players using techniques usually more powerful than their own, regardless of skill level. They feel like it is cheating. But at the end of the day, look at the scores. They're pretty even after everything evens out. But this creates the fundamental question. If two-handed bowling is legal and provides such massive advantages, has bowling fundamentally changed into a different sport at the end of the day? Well, yes and no. Belmonte's success created a generation of two-handed bowlers, many of them being left-handed. Youth bowlers saw the advantages and naturally gravitated towards the technique, offering the best chance of success. After all, if you saw one-handed and you saw how good this new two-hander guy was doing, wouldn't you want to try that? But now this isn't a story about individual dominance. It's systematic. A lot of college programs recruit two-handed players specifically because they score higher on collegiate patterns. Youth tournaments see two-handed lefties dominating age groups where traditional players struggle, a lot of the time being on easier sports shots. The two-handed left-handed players represent only a small number of competitive bowlers, but account for a disproportionate percentage of tournament victories. Especially in youth bowling, they consistently post higher averages and win rates. College bowling shows similar trends, with scholarships and team positions going to two-handed lefties at rates exceeding their natural representation. Two-handed lefties also get the benefit of equipment advantages. They get to compound off their high rev rate and high ball speed with urethane balls. They react extremely well as a lefty, and being a lefty, you're able to sit in the pattern in the same ball for a long time because you'll pretty much always be guaranteed fresh or close to fresh conditions with urethane. But you all know what I'm gonna say. I eventually make a counter argument in every one of my videos. I give the other side. I try to give them representation in most of my topics I talk about. So here is the counter argument. First and foremost, two-handed bowling requires a significant athletic ability and coordination, similar to one-handed. It's just not easier, it's just different. Many bowlers who try to switch to two-handed techniques from one-handed completely fail because the competitive demands are just completely different. Second, two-handed lefties face unique challenges that traditional players just never encounter. Equipment selection becomes more complex, coaching is harder to find, and the technique creates consistency challenges that don't really exist as much with one-handed. Take, for example, trying to play the gutter, trying to shoot spares. Imagine trying to shoot your one-handed spares straight as a two-hander who has a 500 rev rate. Of course, on shorter patterns, you're going to struggle. I bowled on Cheetah this weekend, and I saw a lot of people with higher rev rates struggling to shoot spares two-handed. And third of all, the advantages only exist in specific circumstances, as I mentioned in my last video. On patterns that don't favor left-handed play or the fresh is just super hard and it neutralizes power advantages, two-handed lefties can struggle much more than traditional one-handed righties. Clearly, the skill argument suggests two-handed lefties succeed because they mastered a more complex and energy-demanding technique, not because they're exploiting unfair advantages. When the left side is fresh and it's difficult, the lefties struggle. When the righties have it easy, they have it really easy. That's why you see a lot of events where lefties are just way at the bottom of the leaderboard and the entire top 10 is righties. But you also have the exact opposite, where sometimes you have lefties all in the top 10 and everyone under 24 is just a righty. The two-handed controversy represents a fundamental question about bowling's future. Should the sport embrace technique, or should we regulate it or lead it down another path? As two-handed bowling becomes normalized, traditional players have to adapt or get left behind. The other path, on the other hand, involves regulation and separation. Should we separate them into different divisions and different competitions? Honestly, no. But that's up for everyone to decide. Both paths have a little bit of merit at least, but honestly, I only see the first path working. So here's the conclusion. Here's what you should get out of this video, whether you watch the whole thing or not. First of all, two-handers should stay in the sport. I think they're a good thing to the sport. One-handers just have to adapt. I like bowling against two-handers, and I think two-handers feel the exact same way. Sometimes they do have a legitimate advantage. When urethane is in play, for example, left-handed two-handed bowlers, for example, get a much easier time and can stay in that ball a long time. But here is my crucial point. Two-handed lefties aren't cheating, they're just optimizing within the rules bowling has established. The technique is totally legal, it's always been legal, and will likely always be legal. This controversy isn't really about legality at the end of the day, it's about balance. When technique and position create such significant advantages with a question mark, it raises fundamental questions about fairness in competition. These advantages exist because there are more people on the right side of the lane and more people that bowl one-handed. If it were the other way around and we were back in 2008 when Belmonte was having his rookie year, would we still think the same way? If Belmonte was the only one-hander in a sea of two-handers, would we go the other way and make fun of him for being a one-hander? Honestly, I think at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Whether you hate it or you like it, it's here to stay. But what do you guys think? I want to know in the comment section below, and leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Do you think lefties have an advantage? Righties have an advantage? Two-handers. Should they be legal? Should they not? Feel free to debate in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys next time.